Disappointment understandable there. For more on this story and other news around the league, we welcome in NHL insider Frank Seravalli. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. What else can you tell us about the Jets netminder?
Yeah, guys, this is something that Connor Hellebuyck has been managing and trying to work through and grind through since training camp. And the Winnipeg Jets, at his urging, finally just said enough is enough. Let's get this cleaned out. Let's get it fixed, and let's get you back, because what really matters here is competing for a Stanley Cup in April, May, and June. And the Jets are off to a good start. Connor Hellebuyck has again been a big part of that. But now it's time for him to get this fixed and be ready for when it counts the most. And luckily for him, the way they decided to do this timeline-wise, as we get to this time of year, guys, everyone's thinking, what kind of impact, if any, does this have on the Olympics? We know he's a shoo-in for Team USA. He's supposed to be the guy, but he should be back theoretically at the front end of that timeline by around Christmas, and then the back end sometime maybe around mid-January. So somewhere in that sweet spot, he should be back well before the Olympic break, but still certainly raises an eyebrow as to how quickly his game will return once he is back on the ice.
Another Canadian team where their game has not returned in the past 8 games, the Montreal Canadiens, Frank. Is this a team that could be looking at early, or what are you seeing there and hearing from Montreal right now?
Yeah, JD, the Montreal Canadiens have been very active on the trade front over the last 7 to 10 days. Kent Hughes has been making calls around the league. What they found are a couple things. One, they've got a crisis of confidence in net. Both Sam Montembeault and Jacob Dobesch are 2 great goalies that have just found a tough spot and run kind of at the same exact time. 23 goals allowed in their last 4 home games. 2, they're just crushed by the injury bug. And it's not just volume of players, it's impact of players. You could make the argument that Alex Newhook was their best forward so far this season. But then when you pile in Patrick Laine and Caden Gooley and go through the list, Jake Evans goes down this week. It's just been one thing after the other. So not getting the goaltending, crushed by injuries, and they're saying, well, how do we find our way out of this tailspin? Luckily for them, they were atop the Atlantic Division just a short time ago. Now they're on the outside looking in at the playoff picture. Do they make a trade right now to try and salvage that position and this season? I think the answer to that is no. They're not going to be pressured into, for a team where their window to win is just beginning to crack open. They're not going to jump into something just to do it and improve the here and now to try and put a Band-Aid on this. And at the same time, what they've found is that this trade market so far is just put in the oven. It's not even close to being half-baked. They are dealing with a third deck full in terms of teams that they could be trading with. So they're on the market. They're making calls. They're looking around to try and find what they can. But right now, it's a whole lot of nothing.
Back to the Jets, Frank. Brad Lambert was given permission to seek a trade. Where are we at with that?
You know, he's a really interesting piece, DZ, a 2022 first-round pick, late first round, and a guy that has all the talent and skill in the world. And I look back to some other guys who have found some success from line mates and teammates in junior, and you think of Jonathan Drouin and Nathan McKinnon. Well, we know the impact that Dylan Guenther has had with the Utah Mammoth. That's the special sauce that he had with Brad Lambert playing back in junior. And so you know that there's talent there. You know that there's a guy that struggled to break through and find some opportunity on a Jets veteran-laden team, which is going to be counting on those vets to carry them to a Stanley Cup playoff run. It's not going to be with 21-year-old forwards that aren't experienced. He's had some moments, including a game earlier this season in Pittsburgh. He was the second star, put a goal on the board. I think there's a lot left for Brad Lambert to uncover, and it's a matter of him getting that opportunity. And can the Jets find a trade partner, perhaps maybe even a defenseman, that they could get back in return, a positional swap, in order to get them to pull the trigger?
There's a lot of teams that might be looking for a guy of Brad Lambert's skill. I want to kind of go more on the injury front. You've touched on it a little bit. Drew Doughty, this injury, what are we looking at? Is this something where the Kings, you know, in a win now mode, are they going to look to add something, or are they just kind of hoping that it's something that Drew Doughty can come back and they can weather the storm?
Yeah, I think for the short term, that's exactly what Ken Holland and company are going to try and do. The timeline for Drew Doughty is 2 to 3 weeks after getting hit with the puck in the boot to the skate in Ottawa last weekend. So, look, it's tough for Drew Doughty because he's really been beset by injuries here over the last couple seasons. A guy who had been so incredibly durable has, seemingly run into one injury after the other. And so he's working through it. And luckily for him, a guy that we know how seriously and interested he is in playing for Team Canada 2026 Olympics. A lot of people have him penciled into that Team Canada lineup like he was for Four Nations. It seems like he should be well on track to continue that chase. Potentially back well before Christmas. So the Kings are looking forward to getting him back, the top end of that defense core that, when you think about it, the strength is also their weakness. The strength is that they have really strong pairs. The weakness is that without Drew Doughty in the lineup, one doesn't really differentiate itself from the other.
Staying on the injury front, how about Austin Matthews and Stolarz in Toronto?
Yeah, everyone's keeping a close eye on that. And the interesting part about that is how you think back to when they both left the game November 11th, and Craig Berube said, hey, Anthony Stolarz not that serious, might see him on the ice in short order. Austin Matthews, he might have been out longer. The reverse might happen. Austin Matthews, full participant in the skate on Thursday. He's working his way back. Berube mentioned that his shot is looking good, so that's important. But Stolarz, he had gone 9 consecutive days since November 11th without skating. Obviously, if you miss that much time, it's going to take you time just to get your feet back under you again. And so Matthews is closer. I'd say he's in that day-to-day range at this point for a Leaf team that, man, not a lot has gone right so far in this first quarter, and injuries are certainly part of that story.
Yeah, it's been a rough start for the Leafs, but a good one for the Isles. A lot of that is thanks in part to Matthew Schaefer, just 18 years old, has worked his way into that Olympic conversation. What argument can you make for the 18-year-old to make the roster?
He's making one that's kind of undeniable, right, guys? I mean, you see what he's accomplished so far. I don't think this was even a twinkle in the eye of Team Canada. This is a guy coming in as a young 18-year-old defenseman in the NHL. Maybe he'd play 9 games. Maybe he'd get a taste. To think that he's now transcended that conversation into, hey, you're getting put on the long list for Team Canada. You're now part of the IOC's drug testing protocol, which he was informed on Wednesday. This is an incredible story. He's given the New York Islanders a shot in the arm. He has totally changed the perspective of this franchise and where they're heading moving forward. And now to think that maybe a guy who was the longest of long shots is now not just in the conversation, but potentially an injury away. What if Drew Doughty's, injury takes longer? What if? You start to ask these questions, and Matthew Schaefer could be one of those solutions for Team Canada, and it is undeniable the impact that he's had.
Well, there's this surge in youth for the Team Canada roster. There's all this noise. You hear Bedard, you hear Macklin Celebrini. What are you hearing about those two? And is it going to be both of them together, or it's kind of going to be pick one or the other?
Well, that was the sort of reporting and thought process from people that had been close to the Team Canada situation, saying, hey, how do we knock some of these guys who are experienced vets off of the roster? My question and response to that would be, how do you leave them off? These are 2 of the 5 best players in the world so far this season. And with both of the way that these guys have played, Celebrini's game maybe a little bit more complete at both ends of the ice than Bedard. But Bedard does some things that, if you're looking at last year's Four Nations face-off roster, that only these guys couldn't dream of doing. So they have been excellent. Doug Armstrong sent a message to everyone at the beginning of the season, right before with the Olympic orientation camp, saying, you find your way onto this team, you play well, and we'll notice. We'll do the rest from here. I don't know how you could not take him at his word and leave those 2 guys off, because they've been that good.
We talk about these younger players, and it was a great example last night with Connor Bedard. Obviously, it needs to be a few more mature decisions, I guess, on his end, and he regretted, he took full credit for what happened. But how about that controversial no call last night?
Look, first off, you're right. He did, say, hey, this is on me. I've got to find a way to control my emotions, especially as a guy who's emerging as a leader for the Hawks. He wore an A on his sweater for the first time this week. But I also understand and appreciate his passion. This angle looks bad for how close he gets into the official's face, and you can sort of lip read and understand his thought process, but this is also a pretty clear slash on the hands, and it did impact the game. And then you've got the flip side of it, which is that then it's a double down on the missed call because the unsportsmanlike conduct puts the Kraken on the power play and they end up winning the game. So I understand the frustration. I think there's definitely an onus on Connor Bedard, but I also appreciate what Jeff Blashill shared after the game, which was there needs to be a threshold when making a call like that in that type of situation late in a tied game, that if Connor Bedard didn't get super personal with the official and the criticism, that maybe he also needs to have some thicker skin. So I think it goes both ways. And what I love at the end of it is how badly Connor Bedard wants it, because that part has shown quite clearly on the ice, not just with what we've seen this season, but the work that he did in transforming his game last summer.
Yeah, he's showing a lot of maturity, which I like. And just jumping back into the trade question for you, there's two guys that have kind of been on my mind on the Calgary Flames. It's Nazem Kadri and Rasmus Andersson. Is there any noise about them kind of going earlier or later in this season at the trade deadline?
More noise externally than internally, I can tell you that. The Calgary Flames aren't there yet. Just for proof, go look at Dustin Wolf's workload. I mean, he's played the vast majority of the games for this team that's at the bottom of the Western Conference and really struggles to score. They are trying to put a few more wins on the board to see if they can right the ship. I think the fan base, the marketplace, teams that are calling to inquire with Craig Conroy are a bit further ahead than the Flames are in terms of trying to unpack this season that's gone wrong, especially for a team that was so competitive last season, finishing with 96 points. If you think back, they were just behind the Florida Panthers in point total last year in the regular season, which is incredible to think about. So Rasmus Andersson, I believe, it's a matter of when and where, not if. And when it comes to Nazem Kadri, I also think that the demand and interest in the marketplace is going to be so overwhelming for the Flames that it's going to be something that they entered this year not really thinking a lot about, and it wasn't on their bingo card, but now they're going to have to consider because the center market is just so thin, and teams are going to keep calling. It's not just going to be those two. It's going to be Blake Coleman. But you mentioned earlier or later. I think as it stands right now, it's trending certainly much toward later, but there's inherent risk that comes with that too for the Flames.
Yeah, it'd be difficult not to leverage those assets just given where they are in the standings. Frank, we got our money's worth with you, my friend. Thank you so much for all the insight. You might need a water break after this one.